Thank you, everyone. I'm gonna have I hear a lot of expectations and announcements. There's gonna be no such thing. Hold your horses. I'm gonna talk about something very boring, actually, but something that needs to be addressed because we all use it, and we all have to use it if we want to make this entire space into a success. So, XRP ledger infrastructure at scale. I'm gonna just check. Who here ever looked at the source code of RippleD in C? Okay. Well, that's good. We're at a dev conference, right? Okay. And who here is running a project, be it a hobby project, something in production, a tool, who is running something on the XRPL? Everyone? Just. And who runs their own node to connect to? That's what I guessed. That's both hands. And that is fine, by the way. I'm not here to tell all of you that you're leechers of public infra, because that's what it's for, right? So, a quick intro, although I think it's not really necessary. I'm Wietse. I was going to take, well, say a sabbatical in 2017. The sabbatical lasted for 3 months because on my I want to look into these things list was the XRP ledger, which was, kind of addictive. If you plug into a WebSocket and 1 minute later you have a live stream of ledgers, and then 1 minute later you send a transaction which gets confirmation in 4 seconds, then you realize that you can actually build things that are useful. So I started building XRPL Labs with Ali and Tristan, and now we have a much bigger team. And we are building Sum, our flagship product. And people think that we are just building Sum. We aren't just building Sum, we're building libraries. And many projects here will probably use them, maybe even without knowing. We're contributing intellectual property source code to the XRP Ledger Foundation. We're providing knowledge. We have courses for developers to get familiar with XRPL internals. And we're enjoying doing that, and are pretty vocal and visible on Twitter, GitHub, NPM, Docker, wherever. So you probably used something we've built or are using. One of the things you may not realize, well, in this room we'll all realize, but in the ecosystem, and especially new people joining the ecosystem, the one thing we don't think about is the thing that's always there, which is RippleD, the source code, the binary compiled from the source code, it's there. And there's infrastructure, because you download this library, one line in your terminal, and then you run something, and you can query for a transaction, which is great, and then your journey starts because you have to build something. But you're plugging in to XRPL infrastructure that's just magically there, right? It's there, always to connect to. And I'm going to say a few words on the state of that infra, where it's today and where I think it should go, and where I think we should take it, all of us. Because that goes to viability. What we're doing today is not viable, and we all want to be here a couple of years from now, and we would preferably not rely on donations from one big entity to keep that operational. So I think we should solve this problem, all of us. That means individuals, but especially companies as well, leveraging the XRPL and the entire ecosystem to run their business. And the XRPL infra is made out of nodes. Lots of them. People know validators. They're the magic sauce of the XRPL, right? It's the governance. That's what validators are only a small part, because validators are just there, hopefully behind a firewall, doing their thing. You can't get information from them. You can get information from the regular public nodes running on the XRPL, or powering the XRPL, running everywhere on the VPS, on bare metal, for one project or contributing to the entire ecosystem. And they can be full history. They might know all the ledger information all the way back to, well, not really the first, but the first ledger we can access. And you can configure your nodes to be something else. For example, only keep track of the last, I don't know, 2,000 ledgers, and then have a window that moves forward. Or configure nodes to do, for example, pathfinding, and easily make cross-currency payments on the ledger. And they all require somewhat different configuration, different hardware specs. And if you connect to the XRPL today, except for the 9 people who just showed that they are running their own nodes. You are probably connecting to something.ripple.com or xrplcluster.com. And you're connecting to a WebSocket or just sending HTTP post requests. S1 and S2.ripple.com, they have a round-robin DNS set up, so you might query a different node every time based on how the DNS gets interpreted by the client. And they have a caching layer, Clio or reporting mode to make a lot of queries more efficient. XRPL cluster takes a different approach. I don't think one is necessarily good or bad. I think it's good to have both options, because then you can mix and match and see what kind of query performs best on the cluster you executed against. An XRPL cluster uses unicast IP addresses, which means they're the same IP addresses wherever you are, and you get connected to the closest node, geographical node, which then knows the closest low latency nodes and the least busy nodes, and your query just is sent to some of them. You get a response, get it back, don't realize that it's happening. And there are 32 nodes powering XRPL cluster. I don't know what's behind the Ripple cluster. And we scale XRPL cluster horizontally with different types of nodes. So we analyze the query. We know if it is a query that might need full history. So for example, if you query it for a transaction hash, we have no idea if that transaction was from a day ago or from a year ago or from all the way back. So we send those, even though the transaction might be from 4 seconds ago, we send it to a full history node. We want an answer. And if we get the answer that we don't know about the transaction, then we know it's not there in the entire history. And there are, I mentioned, there are submission nodes. The nodes do nothing. They answer to nobody. They just get your submit request. They broadcast the transaction. They can never be busy with anything else. Pathfinding nodes. Pathfinding needs a lot of memory because it needs to keep up to date with the order books, and they roll over every now and then, which is, by the way, fine because the cluster notices and sends all the queries to the next server. If there was one in motion, it just replays it on the next node. Another advantage if you scale horizontally. And this is all being done in middleware. These nodes are operated by several people from this ecosystem. Several individuals who contribute nodes capacity to the cluster. So that's not centralized, that's run by many people, but the domain name itself and this infra, yeah, that's kind of centralized. And I don't really see a way to solve that, except we have a great solution, and it's for all of you to run your own nodes. But a lot of people and a lot of companies aren't running their own nodes. I already covered this. 2 big clusters. So that's the bring your own node solution, right? Bring your own node. There's no central entity. Just you run your node for the project. No burden on the public infra, but it has problems. And I've spoken to several parties in the ecosystem, even the bigger ones, exchanges even. Why are you using public infra? Why aren't you running your own nodes? There are plenty of people in this room who could help them and would want to help them set it up. And the answer is that they prefer not doing any maintenance. They prefer the fact that it automatically fills over, right? If there's one node down, the cluster, the middleware, will take care of replaying the transaction elsewhere, and the client doesn't even notice. You might get a response half a second later. Run your own node, and one node isn't a node. You need 2 nodes, because you need to be able to take one down for maintenance. Maybe it fails, maybe it runs on bare metal and something crashes. And maybe we finally get Moon, or we get, I don't know, the whole world in crypto ends, and everyone goes to their exchange, submits their transactions, wants to withdraw, and maybe we do not have enough capacity to cater everyone. And public infra is great, right? Because it has unlimited capacity. You can just step into, right? It's magic, it's cloud. And it's free, which is great. Even if you're making millions, it's better if it's free. This is a very Dutch thing, by the way. So there are little incentives, or maybe even no incentives, to run your own infra, unless if you care about the fact that you get the actual response from the actual node of what actually happened on the network. Because if you think about exchanges relying on public infra for the truth, anyway, it's still not enough to convince them. They're still not running. They're offering checks. They would want to pay a couple of hundred or maybe €1,000 a month for access to the infra. But it also gets tricky, because if we have a handful of people contributing to the infra, and we have one central platform, who are they going to pay? How are you going to distribute that? How does it scale? Right? So in the meantime, all these nodes operated today by different people. They have, I don't know, co-location, server renting costs. They have to pay for hardware. So, by the way, if you run XRPL infra, especially for history, do not ever consider renting that as bare metal from a hosting company, because they'll make you pay so much that it's going to hurt every day, every time you get a bill. So it's, in that case, it's cheaper to just buy your own hardware, do your own maintenance, co-locate it somewhere. The storage, again, full history, is crazy expensive, because the one thing Ripple eats is I/O. So SSD isn't even enough. You need SAS SSDs, for example, 400,000 IOPS per second, NVMe, crazy expensive. Connectivity needs to be good, but you get that if you go for co-location. And it eats bandwidth, especially if everyone's querying your machines. We're talking double-digit terabytes per month in queries. Like, what's my balance? Trust lines, lots of trust lines. And what we're doing today is not viable, right? And yes, there are contributions, but maybe the contributions won't come one day. And maybe at some point we just all want to be able to make this ecosystem thrive without relying on one main contributor. So we should solve this. And there's a 80-20 rule on the XRPL infra as well. 80% of the load on public infra comes from 20% of the network of the parties connecting to the cluster. And then this is a tricky one. But if you look, because it's $1 million a year to run this infra, USD. It's crazy. It's a crazy number for something that's just always around. You will only hear people if it doesn't work, which should never happen. And then we see that Ripple actually contributes the lion's share of the money required to run infra. And this is not sustainable. This can't go on. Especially if you consider that there are actually people and companies, exchanges, willing to pay. And I'm not presenting a problem here without a solution, or hopefully a solution. I think it will contribute to a solution. We're probably not there yet if all of what I'm going to share next is built, but I think it starts the discussion. It allows for something better than what we have today, and maybe it will be viable at some point. I'm going to propose the Airbnb model for XRPL infra. And what's the thing Airbnb does? They don't own any houses. They own nothing. They are just a router of availability, of space, of resources in exchange for money. And what we can do is offer one platform that does health checks, that does sanity checks, that allows everyone to plug in their node, allows users to connect straight away, just like they do right now, without auth for a low amount of transactions. Right? If you're building a wallet, you should just allow your users to connect to this platform, and on an individual user basis, they shouldn't be rate limited. But if you start a business, if you have one big pipe to this infra, then you might as well contribute. And then apps, platforms, and exchanges, they're getting best of both worlds, because they don't want to run their infra themselves because it's too expensive. They can pay for it. They don't want to maintain it. They don't have the knowledge to maintain it today. They might gain the knowledge today, and then high turnover, that person is gone the next week or the next month. It's crypto, right, every year. And they don't have the knowledge anymore. There's a new Ripple update, amendment goes live. You don't want to be amendment blocked. This also happens, by the way, exchanges running their own node, and then suddenly they can't process withdrawals. And that just happened when a new amendment went live, right? They didn't update. So exchanges might want to, and we have to educate them, but might want to run their nodes, and businesses might want to run their nodes. And I think, for example, even our company, with a massive amount of connections to the public infra, we should sponsor it as well. And take Ledger, you know, the hardware company. They're consuming 40% of the current public capacity in their client, and they don't run anything. But what we can bring to them, if there's a platform like this, I mean, they already use public infra, let them plug in with auth, with an API key, let them run their own nodes, take them into the cluster as a private node for their API key. So what you can do is mix and match public infra with your private infra, or maybe fall back. So you have your API key, you plug in your own nodes, we will do your sanity checks, health checks, we will send you a warning email if you need to update or whatever, or we'll send you an update that you are missing ledgers, that you're off sync, that I don't know, that your machine went off a fork. And if that happens, we will warn you, and we will take you out of your own local cluster connection and have you fall back on public infra. But they'll pay for that API key. And then infra operators, a lot more hopefully than we have today, can contribute their resources to this cluster. And they can make money that way, because if this platform, if the Airbnb of infra is being paid by the companies to consume these resources, that can be redistributed based on the loads sent to the nodes. Either because it was fallback, something died, was irresponsive, or maybe they took machinery down for updates. Or maybe they have a peak. And maybe you get exchange launches something what not everyone wants to sell by, I don't know. They have a lot of withdrawals to process. Maybe we realize that their node gets slow, irresponsive, something weird happens, we can automatically fall back. If it's all dead, just fall back to the entire cluster. Or you contribute just your infra and do nothing else, which is perfectly fine. Because if you know how to maintain a Linux server, and if you have the resources to run a proper node, and if you want to contribute that, and we can verify that you are actually on the right ledger, and that you actually have the transaction history, and that your transaction history actually matches the history of the others, because there's an entire cluster, right? We can verify. Then you might as well turn that into a business. And the advantage would be, opposed to what we see today, is that the money from the ecosystem is flowing back to the ecosystem, instead of this one company that turned it into a business to just run VPSs with DLT software on it, which might help, but it's, again, is that viable? So what the cluster would provide would be a platform where you get your API key, where you can both be a consumer and a contributor and anything in between, where it will automatically monitor the infra you provide, where it will take care of billing and payout. We can do payment channels. And I mean, we have this wonderful layer for payments, right? It works really well. So that's the easy part, where it's easy to distribute the value from one party to another party. And then maybe at some point turn that into a marketplace for resources, because we have RippleD today with RPC and WebSockets, but it can answer a lot of queries, but it can also answer a lot of queries not that efficiently, right? Maybe you want to aggregate information, or maybe you want digested information about NFTs on pages. I know several projects, they're here today as well, who build indexers, who build stats platforms, APIs with aggregated data. You might as well turn that into something that's available on the same layer. And again, allow people to monetize, without the Airbnb 30%, by the way, their APIs as well. And yeah, what we then get would be hopefully viable infra operations, healthy infra economics, reduce infra centralization with just one star behind it, because there's still one domain name and there's Cloudflare and everything's Cloud. If Cloudflare's down, we can just all go home anyway. So more community involvement, because we have the brains. It's just not easy to contribute. And then maybe if you run a node, where to go with that node, how to actually allow queries to go to that node. We get the best of both worlds. Right? You can be just a consumer, you can just be a provider, you can be anything in between. And we are going to disincentivize the 80-20 situation, because if the big consumers are going to pay by using an API key, they have two options. They pay, fine, money goes to the ecosystem, or they run their own infra. Fine, because they contribute infrastructure to the ecosystem. We're currently writing this. Here they are again, the TypeScript geeks. We're going to write it in TypeScript, JavaScript. There are more efficient languages, for sure, to build this. But if we want to be inclusive in allowing people to contribute to this code, TypeScript is a great choice, because a lot of us write TypeScript, and not that many people of us write C, Rust, Go, whatever. TypeScript, JavaScript is not the most efficient language, except we have Bun runtime these days, which is, I don't know, who knows Bun? Anyone? 1, 2, 3. That's not a lot. Look into this. Bun is a JavaScript runtime that's way more efficient than the Node runtime, and it's getting more and more feature complete with just the Node runtime. And actually, for what we want to build here, it has everything we need. WebSockets came maybe in the 3rd release of Bun. And I tested this. This is real. 700,000 WebSocket messages per second on one core with TypeScript syntax. So I'm pretty confident that this will do just fine in production. The end. I don't know how much time I have left.
We have about 5 minutes.
Oh,
so,
perfect. Couple of questions.
Questions?
No questions.
No, it's not really a question, but
Comments also fine.
I'd like to remark. We are a very small project with 3 men, and I'm the only IT manager of the project. And for me, I'm now building a Python app, and this running a node and installing all this software on a Linux server, and also getting this hardware done. The tutorials and how to install all this Linux stuff, that is for me that helps me back.
Yeah. There are tutorials.
I need time to research all this.
I understand. There's actually,
Linux server installed.
I completely agree, but the tutorials are out there. There's a great documentation on xrpl.org, and there are tutorials from us, even video tutorials. I would very much like to encourage you to look into it and play with it, and to use it for your own project. And if you are familiar with it in your own environment, then it would be great if you contribute. Even if you're using your own capacity, you might have excess capacity, right? So that works as well, where you contribute to the ecosystem what you don't need yourself.
I like your remark. It's a big mission to install all this stuff.
It is. It may not be for everyone, but it sure is something a lot more people in this room and the future ecosystem can do, opposed to who's actually doing it right now. And then, this is actually a little bit of a sad story. There are people in the ecosystem running their nodes because they wanted to contribute. This is one of my regrets from back in the days. I did blogs on the infra, like how to run a validator, how to run a node, how to run a full history node. People started doing that. People bought hardware, hired a VPS, installed a node. The one thing I didn't mention well enough was that the node will do absolutely nothing, unless if you use it, put it to use, or plug it into a cluster like this. Yeah.
So it's like test-based.
But please look into it, and if you have questions, you know how to reach me. So
You're telling you.
Hello.
Next question.
Hey, nice talk. I'm here, by the way.
I have a light straight into my...
It's fine. How do you verify the integrity of the messages sent by the nodes?
Yeah, so that's something we have to do today, actually. Because we have a cluster, and because we have multiple servers with the same data for load balancing and geographical routing reasons, we can easily send queries to multiple nodes and compare the results. And you don't have to do that for, I mean, that would increase the load times too, right? You don't have to do that for every message. Another thing we're doing is that we have a constant stream, like validation stream, transaction stream, to every server contributing. We need to have that anyway, because if the stream stops delivering messages, we take you out of the cluster. Your server isn't worth anything. But if we have the validation in the messages stream, we can also verify that what you're sending equals what all the other nodes are sending us anyway. If it doesn't match, out of the cluster.
All right, so we have one more question. But if you want to ask, we'd say more questions, please see him after the talk on the side. We'd say the question's over here.
Hi. Is there any kind of latency hit by adding an extra layer between the consumer and the node?
Of course there is, but you won't notice it. I mean, there's a huge spread in latency anyway, because, for example, as far as I know, I don't know this for certain, but I believe Ripple is running their S1, S2 cluster in the US, and only in the US. So from Europe here, and other Asia would be worse, it's already a 100, 200 millisecond ping to that infra. And we brought it down for most users to maybe 20 milliseconds. So we have a lot of extra milliseconds for the middleware layer. And yes, it does add a couple of milliseconds, but I think it's worth it. And I think because the middleware doesn't run in one location, but we run it at multiple locations around the world, we know where the different servers plugged into the infra are, so we can route them based on low-cost path being cost in terms of latency, ping, how far is the server away, how busy it is. So I think we'll actually be better off. And yes, would a direct connection to that node that you're going to be connected to anyway be faster? A couple of milliseconds, but I don't think anyone really cares about those couple of milliseconds.
Sorry, we just, not a question, but I understand a comment, a quick one.
Yeah, just to say publicly, I don't think you hear this enough, but the guys at Zoom, they've done so much for this. I couldn't tell a project that doesn't use your products, one way or the other, be it the infrastructure, be it the wallet. It's massively misunderstood. And these guys are showing the way to from other chains as well, because it's so organized, it's so well done, and so well put together.
Thank you.
It is impressively good.